This week's meetings lay the groundwork for the leaders' gathering, which takes place next month, including U.S. President Donald Trump, who is expected to come to Canada for the first time since launching his global trade war. Christine Lagarde is the president of the European Central Bank and joins me now from Banff. Madame Lagarde, thank you for doing this. I do wonder, as these meetings wrap up, are the G7 nations emerging from this meeting resolved to the fact that tariffs are going to exist? They're going to come from one of our biggest trading partners, and it is simply an economic fact we're going to have to deal with moving forward?
Well, very glad to be with you. I think that the meetings we just had under Canadian presidency were extremely useful and actually allowed people to understand each other a little bit better. And while it's fairly obvious that international trade will never be the same again, it's also pretty clear that there will be further negotiations, that there will be further movements on the part of all partners in the trade in order to probably reduce the major imbalances that we have at the moment and that we have had for a long time. I think the Canadian presidency has been really good at focusing on the key issues and also being on all the top key developments that will impact our economies going forward.
I want to dig into the line you said about the international trade will never be the same. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has repeatedly said that the old relationship with the United States is over and something new will have to emerge from this. What is that new relationship? What does that look like, especially the relationship between Europe and Canada?
Well, you know, in every threat, there is an opportunity. And I really believe that what sounded like a complete reshuffling of the cards as of April the 2nd this year has also launched a complete review of relationships, of trust, of diversification of sources and destination of both products and services, and of the long-term relationship between both the policymakers, but also, more importantly, the economic actors. You know, enterprises are the ones that are going to be directly impacted. Consumers are the ones that are going to be directly impacted. And the way in which commerce was set up until now was very much based on this free movement, open market, trade that could go sort of unaffected by a number of tariff and non-tariff barriers because they were so low. Now, this is clearly changing. And I think we have, between Canada and Europe, we have to, you know, look at our respective strengths, weaknesses, gaps, and the agreement under which our relationship has been built with as much new potential as possible going forward.
It's one thing to take advantage of those opportunities, as you call them, when things are going well. Canada is expected to slip into a recession this year. Europe isn't expected to go into a recession, but I think it's less than 1% growth in 2025. What needs to be done to try to take advantage of the opportunities that are presented in what is going to be a tough economic time for both economic regions?
You know, I think it will be in everybody's interest to remove the level, to reduce and hopefully remove the level of uncertainty that we have at the moment. It's one thing to have tariffs, and it's not, you know, a win-win outcome. But it's another thing to have complete uncertainty. And what we are seeing in our economies in Europe is a concern, an anxiety on the part of economic actors about the rules of the game, about the framework within which they will operate. And as a result of that, their natural reaction is hold, freeze, wait, don't invest, don't lay off, but don't hire either. So this sort of standstill of our economies is necessarily bad news when it comes to growth, when it comes to jobs, when it comes to development of activities, innovation, productivity, and what have you. So I think that our collective objective should be, first and foremost, remove the uncertainty. Second, try to negotiate and agree on rules of the game that will be favorable for all parties, not just for one party. And that necessarily requires that there is more diversification, that alternatives are considered, and that solid relationships that maybe we considered as granted or for granted be further developed. And I think that's very much the case for the relationship between Europe and Canada.
Here in Canada, one of the responses to the tariffs has been a resolve to get rid of a lot of the internal trade barriers among provinces. And it ranges from everything from labeling to labor mobility to trucking and shipping regulations. I wonder what examples you could give of those kinds of things that we can get rid of in the Canada-Europe relationship that might speed along trade and get rid of some of that uncertainty that would lead to investment, hiring, and growth.
Well, unfortunately, I'm no longer trade minister, which I used to be way back in 2005. But I know that the European Commission is really working hard at the moment on simplification of labeling, of packaging, of some of the requirements that are not considered as essential and necessary. And I think that will result in less red tape and smoother movement of goods and services within Europe, but also between Europe and its trade partners. And I hope this is the case between Europe and Canada as well. There is a lot of work to do. When I look at the volume of inertia and the level of barriers that we have erected over the course of time amongst ourselves within Europe, it's figured at an equivalent of 40% of tariff barriers within the European Union, which, if removed, could significantly increase our growth in Europe. And we just have to do it. It's not something that we were used to. It's not something that bureaucrats will enjoy because it's very counterintuitive, but we just have to do it.
You've been through a lot of these meetings before, and as you well know, but to remind our audience, a lot of the finance minister, central bank meetings is a setup to the broader leaders meeting that will take place next month. You're trying to set the parameters for those conversations. With that in mind, there was a lot of talk coming into this meeting that the non-US members would sort of band together to take a position maybe against the United States. That didn't quite emerge. What does that tell us about where the G7 is and what we can expect to see when the leaders convene next month?
I think the G7 under Canadian presidency has clearly established its credential as a forum for dialogue. Those meetings are not intended for a big fight. They're intended to lay the grounds, identify the issues, try to resolve some of them, lay the ground for leaders then to consolidate agreements, to consolidate a path towards an agreement. So we are not here to negotiate trade arrangements at all, but we are here to identify what the hurdles are, what the objectives are, and what the imbalances have to be addressed in terms of trade, in terms of norms, in terms of measurements. We had long discussions about artificial intelligence, about the cyber risks, about all the the new dimensions of our economies and their developments, and how it has to be kept safe and secure in case of adversarial developments. But have we resolved all the trade issues? No, of course not. Have we agreed that uncertainty is not good for our economy? Absolutely. And I hope that leaves the ground for leaders to actually reduce the level of uncertainty and agree that arrangements will be found, settlements will be agreed, that will be propitious for all parties involved.
That consolidation, that path toward an agreement that you speak of, though, requires trust. It requires confidence that these relationships can be relied on. Is the American administration, the current American administration, reliable in your mind? Can you trust the U.S., given that it has imposed tariffs on some of its closest economic and military allies?
I think the future will tell whether agreements can be reached, whether solutions can be found, and whether trust can be rejuvenated, if you will, between partners who have been allies for such a long time.
Just in closing, I wonder how much communication you've had with Prime Minister Mark Carney, and you've known him for years. I wonder how important that relationship is for Canada and Europe going forward.
Well, Mark Carney and I have known each other for a long time. We've been companions of many battles. We won a few, lost a few as well. But I'm certainly thrilled to see that he is in the position he is now, leading the beautiful country of Canada and standing strong and tall and really giving full credit to the Canadian people and Canada as a country. I think it's wonderful, and to the extent that our friendship and our long-standing relationship can be of any help going forward, I will certainly do the best I can to facilitate that, and I'm sure he will as well.
Did you have direct communication with him before the G7 meetings in Banff?
Yes, I did.
Do you want to disclose what you discussed in those meetings? How you're obviously talking to Tiff Macklem and to François-Philippe Champagne. What were you saying to the Prime Minister?
Well, this is a private conversation between friends.
Fair enough. We're going to leave it there. But Madame Lagarde, thank you very much for making the time to speak with us today.
My pleasure. All the best.
Thank you. Christine Lagarde, President of the European Central Bank.